Okay, so I'm here in my nice big field. The wind's quite gusty. It's gusting up to probably 15, maybe 18 miles an hour. If my wind's coming from this direction and it's quite windy, if I lay my wing out lengthways like this, um, the wind's going to be picking up the trailing edge. It might even get into the sails, and the wing's going to be a bit of a mess as I lay it out on the ground. So what I'm going to do is lay it out lengthways in line with the wind, so the wind is blowing along my wing. The reason for doing that is it's less likely to pick up the wing. You can see here, if I just adjust it slightly, the wind now is just blowing along the wing like that. It's not picking up the trailing edge, it's not getting in the sails. So that allows me to just leave that end there and continue unpacking the other half without it thrashing around or being picked up by the wind. Now the wind's switching. The wind was blowing that direction, it's now coming behind me, it's kind of blowing this way. So I'm going to move this tip a little more in line with the wind, like so. If it gets really windy, then you can weight this end of the wing, weigh it down with something, like your harness or whatever, while you check your lines. I normally just check my A's. If they're clear, I'll then pull the brake lines out. Usually step round to the side, make sure they're clear. And then all the lines in the middle, your C's and D's, will usually just sort themselves out. So yeah, this wind is pretty strong. It's probably gusting up to maybe 20 miles an hour now, and it keeps changing direction. So hopefully we're able to give you some good strong wind ground handling tips. Now I'm going to attempt a cobra launch because my wing's set up lengthways in line with the wind. You can see my sails on this tip are already starting to inflate. If I pull on the A's on this side, the wing's going to kind of come up like that, and then I'll step right underneath it, and then the wind will be directly blowing into my back, going in that direction. So I'm just teasing it up like this. I'm holding a bit of brake on, and that way I can just keep the wing there if I want. And then all I'm doing is pulling the brake and a little bit of the A's each in time, and then the wing's kind of just coming up by itself. Now I'm pulling more brake, and stepping underneath. There I am. So my first tip is to not use a windsock while you're ground handling. And the reason for that is most flying sites, well, particularly here anyway in the UK, and my sites, they don't have windsocks. And no one usually brings a windsock. I don't have my own. So when I turn up to fly, there's usually 99% of the time there'll be no windsock. So that means I have to rely on other methods for judging the wind direction. The wing is my windsock. So if I'm building a wall like this and I can see that the right hand side of the wing is higher like that, it's just telling me I need to move to my right hand side to level it out like that, so it's nice and level. I've also got some flags over there, for example. There might be smoke, fires and things. I can throw up a bit of grass like this. It's teaching you to look at other indicators of wind direction, which will also help when you're in the air, doing cross country and the like. Let's not forget that ground handling is just simulating takeoff. So the more realistic we make it, and the less aids that we use for ground handling, the more realistic it's going to be to taking off on a flying site. My next tip is always wear a helmet when you're ground handling. The reason for that is if you're on the ground, you're more likely to hit the ground. If you're getting dragged, picked up by a thermal, whatever happens, if you're going to hit something, it's way more likely that's going to happen when you're on the ground. If you have an incident in flight, which is going to cause you to hit something, you're going to have a lot more to worry about than just your head. But if you're on the ground handling, wear your helmet. You could get dragged, you could get picked up, anything like that could happen. So just stick it on. So now I'm going to show you the A's and C's method of controlling the wing, which is good when it's strong. I've got quite a significant gust coming through now, so I prefer to use have my A's in my right hand and my C's in my left hand. And what I'm going to do is pull up on my A's and make sure my left hand, which is holding the C's, is pushed forward. Bring it up, and then a little dab on the C's, and you can see the wing is kind of, if I pull on the C's, it's creating a big crease, and that's because I've got a lot more control if I were to kill it. When the wind's fairly manageable, I quite often like to alternate between my A's and my brakes. So I'll pull up with my A's like this, then I'll grab the brakes like this with my arms outstretched. It gives me quite a lot of control. It also means that I'm not pulling too much brake because my brakes aren't around my hands. So my third tip is, if you're practicing ground handling, practice ground handling with your actual wing, the wing you're going to use to fly. A lot of pilots might have a ground handling wing, which is smaller, like a mini wing or something like that, or really old. But the problem with that is that you're practicing and learning all your skills on a wing that you're never actually going to fly. And also, smaller wings are a lot easier to control than your actual flying wing. That will be obviously the correct size for you. So by building up all your skills on a glider you're not actually going to fly, you're kind of defeating the point of ground handling. You're just going to get really good at ground handling a small wing. So here I've got a little cravat on my right hand tip. So to clear that, what I can do is just holding onto the A's with my brakes around my wrists. I can just sort of pull the wing up and then brake, bring it back down. And as the wing comes down, it's sort of starting to clear that little cravat. Now if I just pull on the left hand side, there we go. All I did then was just pull the A's a little bit. Didn't even need to apply any brake, and it just kind of uncurled itself. Okay, now there's a strong gust coming through. What a lot of pilots tend to do when it's strong winds is get as much brake as they can, which isn't always the best option. In fact, usually it's not. So I'll just demonstrate what most pilots do, which is grab as much brake as possible, bring the trailing edge in. Then what happens is the wind gets under the wing like this, and it can start flailing around. Might go upside down, that sort of thing. So what you actually want is a little bit of pressure on your A's. So if you get a nice level wall, rather than pulling loads and loads of brake on, I've just got a little bit, this much, and naturally by leaning back into the wind and lowering my body position, the wing just sits there because there's a little bit of pressure on the A's. If I give them a good tug, the wing's going to launch, but if I don't do that, it's just going to sit there, right? I've got hardly any brake on whatsoever, and I can just sit and resist the strong wind with my body position, and it'll just sit there like that. Another tip is, if you're out ground handling, don't just stand there waiting for the optimum wind conditions. If the wind's a little bit strong or a little bit light, as long as it's safe to do so, try launching your wing, because that's going to teach you invaluable skills about how your wing behaves when the wind's really light, and the opposite when it's strong as well, like now, like today. It's really gusty in this field. If this was on a hill, there's no way I'd launch in it, but here I am with my wing up, and I know what it feels like. So if I'm on a takeoff and it is a little bit top end, right now I'm building up the skills that will help me in that situation. Don't only go ground handling when it's perfect conditions, 10 to 12 miles an hour, and you can stand here, you don't even have to control the wing, and it'll just sit above your head, because that's pointless. That's not going to give you any extra skills. That's keeping you well within your comfort zone. So when it's strong winds, it's really important that you think about your body position, and if I'm stood up on my tiptoes and the wing's picking me up from my hips, from my harness like this, I'm way more unstable than if actually I'm crouched. I've got one foot in front of the other. I've got my left foot in front of me to kind of counteract the wind pushing me, and I've got my foot behind me under my bum, under my harness, for stability. And the lower I get, the more control I've got when it's strong and gusty. And pilots often are too busy kind of looking at the wing, trying to think what their hands are doing, and they completely forget about their body position. And so another little tip, if it's strong, is after you kill your wing, step round to one of the sides rather than just holding your brakes and just hoping that the wing will stay there. So if I kill the wing now, I'm going to pull my left hand, just my left brake, like this, and step round to the side, like that, and it'll sort of fold the wing into a half and the cells will flop over. And now the wind is blowing across my wing rather than into the cells. So now I've got enough time, there's no tension on the lines really. I can put my brakes on and then gather my lines up.